the 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the race for Insurance Commissioner.
Welcome. I'm Drew Dawson, station manager and host at Georgia Public Broadcasting's Augusta Bureau. You are watching the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate among candidates for Commissioner of Insurance. First, let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, Jim Beck, the Republican candidate and General Manager of Operations for the Georgia Underwriting Association. Donnie Foster is the Libertarian candidate. He is an Army veteran and former sheriff's deputy. And Janice Laws, a Democrat, is the owner of J. Laws and Associates, which is a specialty lines insurance agency. Now let's meet our panelists. Maggie Lee is a freelance reporter covering state politics in Georgia, and Jill Nolan covers state government for Community Newspaper Holdings Incorporated. Now let's get started. For the rules of today's debate, please visit the Atlanta Press Club website, atlantapressclub.org. Now, to start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question. Jill Nolan, you get the first question to Donnie Foster.
Hi, Mr. Foster. You say on your website that if elected, you would like to lower the amount of liability insurance that's required.
Yes.
What, in your view, would be a reasonable rate, and how would you go about determining what that rate should be?
Well, I believe a reasonable rate, I believe it's set up right now at 40-40-40 on the rate, and I believe the reasonable rate would be 20-20, dropping it down to bare minimum liability insurance. Right now here in Georgia, it should go down to bare minimum insurance because our tort laws are so easy. It's easy to sue somebody for automobile accidents and everything, that really having the 40-40 and the 60-60 is just outrageous. And I would eventually like to abolish mandatory insurance in Georgia, automobile liability insurance. But first, we need to get it lowered, and we need to get these premiums down because it's hurting the citizens of Georgia.
Maggie Lee, your question to Jim Beck.
Sure. Mr. Beck, let's talk about surprise medical billing. When you're sent to a specialist who's not in your insurance network, even if the hospital where they practice is, the surprise is a hefty bill for services you get later. As insurance commissioner, what would be your approach to surprise billing? What needs to happen in that space?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create transparency all across the insurance space. You know, people know what they pay for insurance, but they don't know why they pay what they pay. So from a rate perspective, you need to know why you're paying the rate. But from surprise billing in particular, that happens mostly in an emergency room setting with anesthesiologists and with emergency room physicians. There's been efforts over the years to try to bring that under control. I frankly don't know why you can't put up a price list. I mean, you know, it always blows my mind. I mean, if you went to a Cracker Barrel to eat and they said, we don't know exactly what this food's going to cost you, we'll let you know when you get to the checkout line, you'd be like, well, I'm not going to buy it then. And so I think we need to do something around transparency. They know what the process, the procedure is going to cost, frankly, before they ever start it. Now, there are complexities sometimes that cause that to change. But by and large, you should be able to know and you should be able to be told. It almost should be advertised. I think the reason people don't want to advertise it is, frankly, because of competition. They don't want their competition to know what the prices are. But that doesn't happen in any other space.
Can I follow up with that? You mentioned that this happens frequently in emergency rooms. Somebody in an emergency situation isn't liable to care about what's written on a price list. What can you do there?
Well, what it would do is it would keep them from charging more than the published price, right? So if you had a published price for that service and somebody came into the emergency room, you're right. I mean, they're going to pay whatever the going rate is. But at the same time, they could look back and see if they were charged appropriately. But quite frankly, insurance companies should treat most of that as in-network. Because if you're laying on the side of the road in I-75 and you've had a head trauma, you have no say-so about where you're taken to the hospital. So really, you don't get to pick an in-network provider if you're in that situation. So I think they should treat it all as in-network, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Jill Nolan, you have a final question for Janice Laws.
Hi, Ms. Laws. I have a question about health insurance. About 13% of Georgians are currently uninsured. That gives Georgia the fourth highest rate, uninsured rate in the country. What do you think should be done to lower that rate?
Thank you for the question, Jill. You're absolutely correct. We have some of the highest rates in the country for uninsured citizens, and it's outrageous. as your next insurance commissioner, I will work relentlessly to close that coverage gap and to put a health insurance card in the pocket of every single Georgian. One of the main opportunities that I see, and I will implement as your next insurance commissioner, is to utilize the 1332 waiver to create a state-based reinsurance program that has been successfully utilized in Alaska. We've seen it in Maryland and most recently in Wisconsin, and it's worked great to stabilize the individual markets and to bring more competition so that we can have Georgians properly covered.
Well, that concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question to an opponent of their choice. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Now, by random selection, Janice Laws, you may ask the first question to one of your opponents.
Sure. I will ask a question to Mr. Jim Beck. Mr. Beck, you've worked in the Department of Insurance. You've worked as Deputy Insurance Commissioner for Oxendine, as well as most recently for our current insurance commissioner as Chief of Staff. Under your leadership, we've seen the highest rates in Georgia on car insurance and some of the highest gaps in health insurance. You've had your chance. Why should Georgia families trust you again with another 4 years? You've had 5 years, and under your watch, we've seen your results. With that record, how can we count on you as our next insurance commissioner?
Well, actually, Janice, I had 12 months. I served for 1 year as Chief of Staff for the current commissioner, and during that time, you did not see the wholesale rate increases that you've seen now. There's been a lot of talk about filing use legislation. Filing use legislation is one of those things that supposedly allowed the insurance companies to do what they wanted to do. The truth is it was never intended to do that. Those insurance companies still come and talk to the commissioner and negotiate. The problem is only one side of the table is negotiating. So Janice is right. I have been there. I did spend 1 year under the current commissioner. And frankly, I left because I philosophically thought we could do more. So that's why I'm excited to get back and get the keys to the office so that I can do some of the things I've wanted to do for so long.
Ms. Laws, your rebuttal?
Mr. Beck, I acknowledge your experience, and that all sounds great. Per your resume, it says that you worked from 2008 to 2011, and from 1995 to 97. That's a combined 5 years. You've had your bite of the apple. You've had 5 years, and you did not serve Georgia families. As your next insurance commissioner, I will fight for Georgia families, and I will ensure that we lower car insurance rates and we have a health insurance card in the pocket of Georgians. Thank you.
Donnie Foster, you may now ask your question to one of your opponents.
Mr. Jim Beck, you've been the Deputy Insurance Commissioner for at least the last 8 years. I'm not sure how much longer you have been, but I know it's been at least 8 years. As Deputy Insurance Commissioner, what goals have you actually achieved here in Georgia?
Donnie, thank you. That's a good question. I did serve as Chief of Staff for the current commissioner for 1 year and served as a deputy under a prior commissioner. One of the things I'm most proud of is our fraud fund. Back in the 90s, I helped lead the effort to create a fraud fund in Georgia that's paid by the insurance companies, of course, money collected from the policyholders, but paid by the insurance companies to combat fraud. One of the things that we did that I'm most proud of is a sting on dishonest roofers that were ripping off seniors. We had 10 roofers come out, look at a roof that was in perfect good shape, and arrested 9 of them on the spot for some level of insurance fraud. The fraud fund is, to me, that my grandmother was ripped off by an unscrupulous insurance agent. She was a sweet spirit. It robbed her of her peace of mind and her dignity. That's why I got interested in this business. And frankly, I'm the most proud of the fraud fund. We need to do more. And Donnie, thank you for that question. And thank you for your service, by the way, to our country.
Mr. Foster, you have a rebuttal?
Yes, I would like to say I appreciate the response. Thank you very much. I did not know that, and I'd also like to reiterate, as a Libertarian candidate, of course, we believe in liberty, less government. So when I'm elected November 6th as the insurance commissioner, I'm going to get the government out of the insurance industry and bring a true free market economy system and open up the borders for the citizens of Georgia, hence lowering rates. Thank you.
Mr. Beck, your question to one of your opponents.
I guess my question would be to Janice. Janice, I've shared with you, and we've been on some similar panels, my experience with my grandmother that got me interested in this business or in the insurance business. What drew you to the business of insurance?
The business of insurance is a business of serving people. It's selling a promise, and it's making a difference. It's the kind of business that is there for you when you need it. When you lose a loved one, or your house burns down, or your car burns, you have a car accident. That's what drew me to insurance, because I have a heart of service and I want to serve Georgians, and I wanted to make a difference. And so that's why I got into the business, to make a difference for Georgians. And as Georgia's next insurance commissioner, I will do just that. I will fight relentlessly to make sure that Georgia consumers have a fair shake and that we have full representation at the state level. That's what I've done throughout my career, and that's what I will continue to do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Becker, rebuttal?
Oh, no rebuttal.
All right. Well, that concludes our...
Drew, may I use just a moment of my time to say a special request for prayer for the people in the path of the hurricane, and to give the phone number if people have trouble with their insurance claims. It's 1-800-656-2298, 1-800-656-2298, and if that doesn't work, call my cell phone. We'll make them treat you right.
Thank you, sir. That concludes our second round. For those just joining us, this is the debate between candidates for Commissioner of Insurance. We'll now go back to the panel's ask questions of the candidate of her choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may jump in with a question as well, and I'll determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Maggie Lee, you get the first question in this round.
Sure. I'd like to ask Ms. Laws the same question about surprise billing. What does the next insurance commissioner need to do about surprise billing?
Again, we need to have policies in place to protect consumers from surprise billing, to make sure we have network adequacy, network accuracy. All of those things need to be in place. As insurance commissioner, I will ensure that we hold insurance companies accountable and that Georgians are treated fairly, and that when you have an issue, such as an emergency, or you're dealing with a major issue, you should not have to then worry about surprise billing or balance billing or any of those things. So as insurance commissioner, that's my commitment, is that we have guidelines in place and transparency in place so that there's no questions about it. And that's what's missing. We do not have this accountability, and we do not have actual policies in place to protect consumers.
So quick follow-up, legally, how do you do that? Can you do that with some sort of rules and regulations? Do you need to work with the legislature? How does that work?
Both. As insurance commissioner, I can implement public policy to protect Georgia consumers. I will also work with our state legislators to ensure that we have legislation in place to protect our consumers.
Thank you.
Jill Nolan, your question.
Thank you. Ms. Laws mentioned possibly pursuing a reinsurance, a waiver for a reinsurance program. I'd like to know where Mr. Beck and Mr. Foster stand on that, but also I'd like to hear your thoughts on how such a waiver would fit into the overall solution.
So Janice mentioned a very intriguing idea, which is the high-risk plan. There's been some conversation about, because really and truly what causes most of the price pressure is not the regular trips to the doctor, because you can sort of prepare for that as an insurance company. You can get your arms around what that is. It's the heart transplant. It's the heart-lung bypass. It's all of those kind of complex medical processes. And the way the high-risk pool would work is you'd have a reinsurance mechanism for losses of, say, $250,000, $300,000 or more. There's certainly something to be said for that. I right now run a high-risk pool for home insurance. That's a state-created entity to help people get a home insurance when they can't get it in the voluntary market. So I negotiate reinsurance contracts once a year. I go to London and negotiate with Lloyd's of London. So I'm familiar with the reinsurance program. I think that has a lot of possibility for Georgia. The other thing we've got to do is we've got to make sure these insurance companies quit paper whipping our small doctors and physicians' practices. They are burying them with paper to the point that they can't ever get paid for what the services they provide.
Mr. Foster, your response?
Okay, my response would be, first off, I'm from Georgia and everything, and noticing the burdensome deal, I would deregulate it. We need a true free market economy system here in the state of Georgia. We need to get the state out of the business of the insurance industry. I've seen firsthand, I've actually been encouraged to run up here and run for office due to the people hurting by the high insurance rates, automobile going through the roof, and all that. I've had personal issues with the insurance industry, health, and automobile. I've filed complaints with the state of Georgia, and I'm running firm on a complaint that, hey, the government needs to get out of it completely. We need to open up a true free market economy system and and let the economy work for itself. Once we get true competition here, rates will lower. We get a private consumer affairs company in here to oversee, which when I've had to deal with complaints against the insurance companies, I had to use BB&B. Thank you.
Maggie, a question for you.
Sure. A question for Mr. Beck. Earlier this year, the AJC reported that a federal grand jury had subpoenaed some records about your time at the State Department of Insurance, subpoenaed records from the department. What do you say to people who are wondering what this means or who might be worried about that?
Maggie, I'm glad you asked that question, because I have to tell you, of all the things my wife and I have experienced in this campaign, that has amazed me the most. The controversy seems to come by the fact that I work 2 jobs. I know a lot of people that work 2 jobs to make sure they maintain insurance. My wife is a 2-time cancer survivor. She fought her 2nd battle with cancer in January. I've worked more than 1 job from time to time to make sure we had access to insurance. The 2nd job I worked that seemed to cause some heartburn among the media was a job that paid $7.50 an hour. I'll do that again to provide for my wife and to provide for my family. We're not going to fight the battle of cancer alone. We need health insurance, just like every Georgia family. And I'll stand up for them the way I stood up for my own family. Georgia can lean on me the same way Lucy and I lean on each other.
But you don't know any more about any investigation?
That's all I know. And all I know, frankly, is what I've read. And frankly, Maggie, and please don't take this personally, but only the media has a problem with the guy working 2 jobs. I thought that was what part of the American dream was. My dad was a truck driver. I mean, my dad worked 2 jobs all my life. I thought that's how you got ahead, and that's certainly how you take care of your family. I've had 1 job, and that's to provide for my family, and that's what I've continued to do all my life and will continue to do.
Thank you.
Jill, a question from you.
This is a question for Mr. Beck. It sounds like you don't see the 2008 law, the file and use law, to be wholly to blame for the high auto rate increases. So I wonder if that law isn't repealed, what you would do under current law to help challenge those.
I'm really glad you asked that. I personally blame the commissioner sitting in the corner office. That's where the buck stops. Now, the commissioner has a philosophy, and he has done many good things. Don't get me wrong. I was honored to work for him for a year. But at the end of the day, that law was in effect for a couple of years, and we didn't see these spikes and these tremendous whipsaws of rate. The problem is that it's the way the law is implemented. There's the law and there's implementation of the law. And quite frankly, it's not being implemented, I think, the way that it should be. The commissioner still has broad latitude to say no to excessive rate increases and to say no when markets are uncompetitive. And the law doesn't define uncompetitive or excessive, which gives the commissioner all the power he or she needs to make those kind of determinations. So yes, I sort of think it's the way it's being implemented. I don't mean to be critical of the current commissioner. Everybody has their own philosophy they bring to the table. I bring to philosophy fighting for the consumer and erring on the side of the consumer, and that's what I intend to do.
Maggie, a question from you.
Sure. A question for Mr. Foster. What role do you think the insurance commissioner should play if companies will no longer provide insurance for people or businesses on the coast in places impacted by climate change or severe weather events? If companies are less likely to go to places like that, what, if anything, should the state do?
Well, this would be one where you'd have to, work as a small business person and actually talk to the insurance companies. Hey, why aren't y'all coming down here? I mean, going up and one thing I've learned through the campaign, if you go up and ask, it shall be given. And I've learned that. And this is where you need to ask them, say, hey, why are you not coming down here? What's the issues? And try to work the issues out through there. I would not by any means support any tax credits or anything else that's going to put more taxation on the citizens. And I would not support no laws that's going to jeopardize the liberties of individual citizens over Georgia. But I would try to work with them one-on-one basis, say, hey, what can we do to get y'all down here? We've got an old government building. Maybe we can let you set up office or something like that there.
Thank you.
Jill, a question from you.
This question is for Ms. Laws. You mentioned that you would support seeking a waiver for a reinsurance program, but I wonder if Medicaid expansion fits into your view of the overall solution.
So something Mr. Beck just said is very interesting to me. He said that part of the reason why he was under investigation is because he had to have health insurance. And he said also in his statement, not today, that his reason was to make sure that his wife, Lucy, has coverage for pre-existing conditions. And I think that's very admirable. I've gotten to know them, and I admire them. But Mr. Beck wants that for his family and wants pre-existing condition coverages and supports those coverages that are provided in the Affordable Care Act, but he refuses to support the expansion and the full implementation of the Affordable Care Act. As your next insurance commissioner, I don't care what we call it. I want to make sure that Mr. Beck's wife, my daughter, my family has coverage for pre-existing conditions, has all the coverage for the essential health benefits, has all the coverage that they need. I'm committed to all Georgia families having access to quality, affordable health care.
Mr.
And that's
Beck,
my
a
commitment.
rebuttal?
I don't know where Janice got the information about pre-existing conditions. I favor the current law on pre-existing conditions. As I said, it gets pretty personal. Lucy's fought cancer twice. And frankly, as an insurance person, I worry about genetic testing. I mean, you know, think of the information insurance companies will soon have about our health. They'll know more about what our health is going to be than we do ourselves. And so if we allow them to start carving out certain things, I think you've got a real problem with that. So I certainly am in favor of the current pre-existing condition law and being able to cover people as they're older young adults.
Maggie, a question from you.
Sure. A question for Mr. Beck. We'll go back to the climate question. What do you think should be the role of the state if insurance companies become reluctant to provide insurance down on the coast or places affected by climate change or severe weather?
It's pretty simple. When I was there, we always insisted that if you wrote 10% of the market inland, you should write 10% of the market on the coast. The other thing, not to bore you with details, but the other thing I want to do is set up a little subsidiary of Georgia Underwriting, which would make sure that people are riding on the coast. Quite frankly, I was just in Savannah yesterday. It's a big concern for them. Now, fortunately, the markets are pretty vibrant down there now, but they're not always. Reinsurance is fairly low in terms of expense, and so that's allowed a lot of companies to get into the market. But we need to be vigilant because the Savannah and Brunswick and the port is a big driver of our economy. We need to be sensitive to that and make sure that companies are doing their fair share on the coast.
Thank you.
That is all the time we have for questions. Each candidate will now have 60 seconds for a closing statement. Janice Laws, you get the first closing statement.
Thank you. It's been a privilege being here, and I don't take it lightly. I am Janice Laws, and I'm running to be Georgia's insurance commissioner to fight for Georgia families. Georgia consumers deserve to have a fair shake. Mr. Beck has had his bite of the apple. He's been in the commissioner's office for 5 years, and there's no guarantee that him getting another 4 will do us any justice. On his watch, we've seen car insurance rates skyrocket in Georgia, and we've seen access to health insurance go down. I'm committed to making sure that we lower car insurance rates in Georgia, and we have access to quality, affordable health care. I've traveled the state for the last year on this campaign trail, and one common value that I've seen in all the conversations I've had with Georgia families is we want quality, affordable insurance. And that's my commitment, to make sure that we have lower rates and that Georgians have a health insurance card in their pocket. I ask you for your vote.
I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Thank you.
We're out of time. Mr. Beck, your turn.
Thank you very much, the Press Club, for doing this. I just say very quickly, I've never run the insurance commissioner's office. I've worked for an insurance commissioner. My running the insurance commissioner's office would be a whole nother experience for the insurance companies in Georgia. Frankly, that's why they backed the current commissioner, and the insurance companies backed one of my opponents in the primary. They don't want me in there. Because they know that they're going to have somebody on the other side of the table who can negotiate with them toe-to-toe and go eye-to-eye with the toughest of negotiators. Insurance is a promise. So let me make you a couple promises. Number one, I'm going to double the penalties on those that defraud seniors and veterans, insurance companies that defraud seniors and veterans. Number two, I'm going to work towards affordable and accessible health insurance coverage for Georgia families. And thirdly, we're going to improve transparency. You know why you pay. You know how much you pay. You need to know why you pay the bill, how much you pay, and why you pay that amount of money. We need transparency for consumers at all levels of this insurance industry.
And Mr. Foster, you get the final closing statement.
Okay. I'm Donnie Foster. I'm the Libertarian candidate for State of Georgia Insurance Commissioner. I will say one thing for sure. I am a Georgia citizen. I was born and raised in Georgia. My family goes way back generations in Georgia. I've seen the overburdensome state government, what it's done to the people of Georgia. The two-party system has failed the citizens of Georgia for too long. It is time to put a Libertarian candidate into office and turn around and reduce this government oversight. License plate scanners, just the state just over-regulating everybody at abundance. You can go around the state and see it. Everybody's had issues with automobile insurance. In Georgia, they could use up to 7 years to claim on an auto accident. That's crazy. We need to get the state out of this completely. I'm the third option. Please check me out, fosterforgeorgia.com. Thank you. Thanks for the invite, too.
And that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that Election Day is Tuesday, November 6th, and early voting begins on October 15th. Our thanks to the candidates and the panel of journalists. I would also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club and Georgia Public Broadcasting for arranging today's debate. For more information on the full schedule of general election debates, please visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Drew Dawson. Thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.